podcast. My name's Jack Mclean, and today I'll be discussing everything you need to know in terms of AFL power training. You may have heard plyometrics before. I'll quickly explain and define those and how they're different to jump training and other power training methods, where we're really working on the reactive component and the contact time. So real quickness is the key, and intent to move fast is really, really important. I'll provide 5 tips that you can take away, both for high performance stuff, working with young athletes, and you're looking to bring in plyometric training, or you're looking to polish up your plyometric methods, as well as for developing athletes listening in, or mature athletes listening in that want to start practicing on themselves and implementing plyometric training to their weekly routine. I'll also provide the key findings from our recent poll, what's more important in terms of athlete development and performing at a high level. I sent out a poll last week, so it's been up for 7 days on LinkedIn and our Twitter. And it's really interesting to see the findings comparing the generalist approach, so playing a variety of different sports, your specialists like your Tiger Woods, who focus on playing golf from a very young age, and it depends, leaving it up to the followers on, there's a little bit of context that's obviously involved in different sports, so that you can comment below on different scenarios and how maybe a surfer perhaps might need a generalist approach, where maybe a sport like golf, you actually need to be quite specialized, or gymnastics and start at a young age. So really interesting findings there. I'll share that, and a new poll all about power development. So if you're high performance staff, make sure to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We've got some massive interviews on the podcast this week. I'll release those, and then of course stick around for the very end. I'll provide a tip where I'll give you guys a workout. I actually did this workout this morning, and it's all about improving your Dustin Martin fend-off ability. So the importance of strength training, especially being in the middle of the season. This is where the motivation's at an all-time low, but you can get a real competitive edge if you stick at it and not only do the work, but the real where you can really make a powerful impact and make a big difference to those also playing the sport, is making sure the quality, the technique, and of course your intent and intensity is there. So I'll give you guys a free workout at the end if you want to improve your maximal strength. All right, let's get in it. And hello to everyone on TikTok. Feel free to send through your questions as well if you're tuning in live. But first tip, number one, especially for the parents listening in, consider the age of your child and whether you're exposing them to plyometric training at their football club or at their track and field athletics, wherever they're doing, or if they're doing it with you at home. So make sure to consider your training age, as plyometric training is intense, and we want to make sure that kids aren't just following the advanced depth jumps, drop jumps, weighted plyos that they see on Instagram and TikTok straight onto their body. There's definitely an area where you want to consult a professional strength and conditioning coach, ideally, or someone who's experienced working with athletic development, and have a guide, and make sure that you're periodizing the exercise that you're exposing young athletes to. So that's number one. Consider your training age. How long have you training? We want to make sure we've got really competent movement patterns. So if you haven't mastered things like the squat, deadlift, bench press, and chin up, so your fundamental movement patterns, and you haven't got good stiffness throughout the whole chain, that we don't want to be adding in really advanced plyometrics. Equally, if you've never done any jumping training before, or you've never done low-level plyos like a simple pogo jump, then we want to make sure we're getting those movements in before going straight to the sexy, fancy stuff that you see on Instagram and on TikTok. Number two, consider your body mass. So really important for your big ruckman, your centre half forwards, your centre half backs. You're probably not going to do as many contact times as your speed forwards, your lighter weight athletes, your outside mids. Okay, so we want to consider how heavy the athlete is that you're giving them. Some tips around that: you might just simply stick to double leg movements for your bigger athletes, or you might put them on a gymnastics mat to reduce the amount of force going through the body, and that will not only allow the athlete to actually have quick contact times, but making it a little bit easier for the athlete, but also it will look after their joints, particularly their feet, knees, and lower back. So we want to make sure that you're looking after the athletes and they can sustain a consistent effort on a weekly basis. So consider how heavy the athlete is, and that will dictate hopefully your exercise selection, as well as the surface that you're getting that athlete to do. So typically you want to have a softer surface for those bigger athletes to look after their bodies. But also you might use bands, for example, where they're spending too much time on the ground when you're doing your traditional bodyweight movements. So you reduce some body weight, give them some elastic energy from the power band by doing some overspeed exercises. Simple one that I love to use for vertical jump. So for your ruckman is strap the big blue or red, 2 red bands around the rig, pull it right down so it's on tension, and do a counter movement jump where you're working on jumping as high as you can, as quick as you can. That's just an example. We've got heaps. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel and go to our power playlist, there's heaps of overspeed exercises that you can follow there. Number 3, know your limitations from a medical point of view. So if you've got any Achilles issues and you're at the sort of a later stage of your career and you're all about trying to sustain and try and prolong your career as long as you can, plyometrics might not be for you, or sticking to really simple plyometrics that you know are good for your ankle and foot, particularly around the Achilles. We know that being in that dorsiflexion position under high force and rapid force can irritate the tendon. So things like your foot health, as well as your ankle complex, you might want to be smart about selecting movements where you can keep a relatively straight shin angle, so you're not getting huge amount of dorsiflexion and putting that shearing force on the Achilles. So consider where you're at. Obviously, once you're above the age of 30, it's all about trying to prolong your career, feel good, and make sure you're getting in what you need to build resilience, of course, with hard training, but you don't want to tip yourself over the edge. So being smart with your exercise selection. So that for the older athletes might be a similar approach to our developing athletes, where you keep the movement patterns simple. Things like a hurdle jump, where you're working over short hurdles and you're working on those quick contact times, and doing that instead of things like a depth jump or drop jumps or single unilateral jumps where you plyometric jumps like speed bounce. When to do them. So if we're in season, which most of you listening to this will be, make sure that you're doing it at least 72 hours after the game, because we know that your nervous system from the research will be still recovering at that point. And to elicit a proper stimulus from plyometric training, we want to make sure that you're able to execute every rep at a high level and at super fast speed. So if you're still fatigued and recovered from the game, which you know can take up to 72 hours for most AFL athletes, then you're not really getting bang for buck, and also you're probably putting yourself at risk of potentially getting overload type injuries. So if we get the best of both worlds, we look after the body, we do really well recovery early in the week, and you might do it before your main training session later in the week to prime for that training session, and then get another dose of them perhaps the day before a game for a true prime session. And you're only doing like 2 sets of 3, but they're done at high intensity, super explosive exercises that I love to do in that scenario. For the upper body, it could be some plyo push-ups, or it could be a partner standing on top of a box, dropping a med ball, and you're catching it and releasing it and throwing it as high as you can. Doing some rotational throws, doesn't have to be reactive, but just work on your explosive power. And then doing maybe some 2 sets of 3 broad jumps where you're jumping like kangaroo, you're rebounding out in front, and working on quickness. So good cue to focus on with the jumps for plyometrics to get that short contact time. Imagine the floor is lava, so it's boiling hot, and you don't want to spend a lot of time on the ground, otherwise you'd burn your feet. So you're hitting the ground and driving off the ground nice and quick. So that's number 4, knowing when to do them, typically later in the week in season. Obviously, if you're in pre-season, you could do them, you could microdose them across the whole week. You might have 3 main sessions in pre-season, so you could do a little bit of them throughout each session. You might have a vertical focus where we're jumping up towards the sky. You might on one session, and you might pick some exercises like a med ball overhead throw, toss and throw, so catch and release. Box jumps or squat jumps, or counter movement jumps where you're hitting the ground and driving straight back up. And then on your other main training session, you might have more horizontal focus to focus things on like projecting forward to help your acceleration. So med ball throw with the partner out in front, and you can pair that with we used before, a broad jump or single leg bounds, where you're jumping out in front as far as you can, as quick as you can in a single leg. And then on the last session of the week, you might have more a lateral focus. So doing some lateral drives where you're jumping out to the side, dropping to your right side, hitting the ground and driving back over to your left on one leg. So those lateral drives can be really good to work on your more power cutting, change of direction technique. And then you might have some lateral med ball throws as well, where a partner throws it to you, you're facing side on, you catch it and rotate your hips and throw it back to them. So you can do it that way. Obviously, you could do a little bit of each one as well. So you could do a horizontal, vertical, and lateral, and do that maybe at bookend of the week. Do all three of them on your Monday, and then do all three of them on your Saturday or your Friday, and then have a more of a strength focus in the middle of the week. So there's many different ways you can do it. But that's number 4 in terms of preseason, in-season, when to do them. Last tip, number 5, and probably the most important tip of all, is make sure that your intent is to move as fast as possible. Typically, footballers will continually want to do the work and because it's an endurance sport, typically being such a long game, you apply your conditioning mindset to your power training, and that's the complete opposite that we want to try and approach from a mindset point of view. Rather than just grinding out the work, we actually want to rest as long as as you can tolerate and the time that your schedule allows, so you can get rest periods really low intensity, so you can get high quality technique and execution. So the force that the direction is going, both from your running point of view, you're putting force into the ground in the right direction, but also with your throws are at an optimum. So the force is going in the right direction, but also the speed to be able to being able to rapidly produce that force is done at a really quick rate, and that's what's going to improve your explosive power. Okay, so less is more. Rest as long as you can tolerate, and then when it's your time to go, really flip that switch and bring maximum intensity to every rep. That's critical. So intent to move fast is the number 1 tip out of all of those 5, I would say. If you have any questions, make sure to hit us up. This week's poll actually is going to be on this very topic. So I'm going to produce a poll for all the high performance coaches, strength and conditioning coaches. It'd be great to contribute, as well as athletes as well. The new poll this week is going to be, what's most important for power development? The exercise selection, the intent, the load. So is it body weight? Is it percentage of, if you're doing weighted work like trap bar jumps, the percentage you're doing it at, the reps and the volume, or is it rest periods? So out of those 4, what do you think is most important? Obviously, a little bit of everything is most important for the best, but I'd love to know what you think is the most important thing for power development. So pick one. The findings for this recent poll for high performance and athlete development was pretty convincing. The specialists got 25%. So 25% people on the poll thought that playing a one sport and specializing in that from a young age will set you up for on-field success. Variety was the strongest for 70%. So having that generous approach, exposing young athletes to as many different sporting demands as possible. And then it depends was only 5%, with no one commenting exactly what context they meant around what it depends. So we'll leave it on there. Really loving these polls, loving the findings. Quite interesting to see which way it swings. So make sure to jump onto our LinkedIn and our Twitter to contribute to this week's poll. Shout out to our podcast for this week. We have Lee Edgar on Wednesday. It's a fantastic episode. I ran that interview last week, and it's all about a multifaceted approach to high performance training. So make sure to tune in this Wednesday. Our 2 live episodes with Scott Goldman, 9 a.m. That he's the sports performance psychologist for the Golden State Warriors. That'll be a fantastic episode. Make sure to tune in live for that one and send in your questions. And our second one will be Jacob Jennings, who's a sports scientist. He's also doing his PhD, and he's at the Brisbane Broncos. That'll be 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And then our bite-sized episodes with Anthony Koutafidis. So if you love your football, you'll love that episode, and make sure to listen to the whole episode if you enjoy the bite size. As I promised, we've got our workout for this week to improve your fend-off strength, and that is a workout where you do a pin press, where essentially you're either lying on the ground and doing a floor press, or if you've got the big safety arms, you set that up in the rig. Should be about 2 fists distance from your chest to where the bar is set up, and you start the bar at a halfway point, and you just work on your concentric power. So you should be able to lift at least 10 to 20% heavier than your normal bench press. So if you're a 100-kilo bencher, then you'll be able to do 110 to 120 kilos on the pin press. So make sure you're lifting really heavy. I would advise doing anywhere between 4 to 6 sets of cluster reps where you do 3 reps at that high intensity, good quality. Give yourself 30 seconds to a minute, then do another 3. So it's a great way to get in quality exposure. That's 36 reps at the high intensity. I supersetted that with a seated row, a moderate weight. I plateaued the weight, so the weight was the same the whole time. Good opportunity to do a push-pull and get that antagonist and agonist effect where by working on the opposite muscle groups, it really enhances your performance on both movements. So they work well together, a push-pull in that horizontal fashion. Then you've got your bench press after that. And I find that the pin press, because I've worked so heavy, my bench press performance actually is up after I do my pin press first. And then the athletes that I work with, that is the same. So try that out. So you go your full range bench press now and work up to a heavy set of 5. If that takes you 4 sets, go for 4 sets. If it takes you 5 sets, go for 5 sets. So whatever you've got left in the tank, get a heavy 5. You could do a heavy 4, you could do a heavy 3, no less than 3s typically. And then I superset that with weighted pull-ups. So overarm grip, plateaued the weight as well. You're not quite getting that horizontal to vertical, but I just wanted to get my weighted chin-ups in for the week. So I did that, and then that was for 5 reps every time the weight was the same. So I just did 10 kilos for that this week. And then my third superset was just a simple push press, lightweight, 50%, really working on good speed. And I superset that with neutral grip chin-ups. Did 4 sets of 6. So try that workout out. It's a really good one. It's high quality. You're not getting a lot of fatigue from it. It should prime you up as well as improve your fend-off ability. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, and I'll see you guys next week.